Morning, everybody. Welcome back in the shop with Foster. We're here today to talk about one of the tools that we use a lot in here. It's called a bandsaw. And the reason it's called a bandsaw, the blade itself is one long band, is one long blade that is attached around these two wheels. Bottom wheel has a motor that drives it and turns the top wheel. And so the blade itself is under some tension. It's got to be very tight in order for this thing to work well. It's a very useful tool in here. We use ours mostly for cutting curves, and that's the great part of having a bandsaw. We can use it for other things, and I'll show you a couple easy sort of straight cuts. And if you have our other one that has a fence on it, you could even sort of rip a board in there, but it's not going to be accurate. It's not going to be like the table saw would. So when you get checked out in the shop, what you do is you take your safety sign and you draw the safety fish on it. So we have a template that we use, and then this is your bandsaw test in order to do these shapes and curves. And so when you look at this, we've got a couple different cuts on here. These, right, this is just a triangle, mouth goes in, same thing here. This one's a little tricky because I got to come in. I can't get my blade all the way down into this little corner here. This is tricky because this radius is too tight for me to do it in one cut. So I've got to have a couple other techniques to do that. So we're going to show you our three main cuts. Tangent cuts, remember from geometry, a tangent's when a line just touches a circle in one spot. Relief cuts and nibble cuts. And if you know those three, what you really don't want to do, a couple things. Number one is you don't want to twist this blade. And when you get your piece in there and you realize you got to turn it and you twist it, you put a wobble in the blade. You put a little bit of a bend in there. And then forever that blade is going to be less accurate and eventually it's going to get weaker and fail. The other thing you don't want to do is to have to back out of curved cuts. So when you're making a cut, you want to plan it so that you don't have to back out of a long section. The reason being, if you look at our guides here, so the bandsaw, this one has these two guides that are just sort of square pegs that hold the blade in between. So the blade itself can't twist very far. Behind it is a bearing that we call a thrust bearing, and so that's to take that force since I'm pushing against the blade. Some of them, like our other bandsaw, basically same saw, except they've replaced the guide here with a little different version that you've got ball bearings on both sides. Whichever one you're using, you just want to be really careful when you back out. There's nothing keeping this blade from coming off this way, coming forward. And so whenever you back out, you want to be really careful. And if you're in a long cut, you want to stop the machine and call me, and I'll come over. But we can get it out usually, but it takes a little bit of work. So as with everything, you're going to use wear safety glasses with this. Make sure your ventilation is going. We're going to First, we got our blade guide adjusted. So I got the knob back here, and I dropped this down about 1/4 inch above my material, which means then that I don't have all this blade exposed, right? That's a safety hazard. But it also means that those guides are as close to my material as I can get, and that's important. There's the same set underneath here. There's another set of guides on the bottom. So when that blade runs through, it's got 2 points that it's running through to keep it from twisting. So again, I dropped that down about a squished finger. So pretty straightforward machine. Let me get my glasses. But one of the things that people have issues with on the bandsaw are, number one, just lining up your cuts. So I've already traced my fish out, and I'll show you that. But let's say I want to cut this piece off. I want to save a little bit, but I'm going to get rid of that knot. So there's my line, all right? So I want to cut that line, and it seems pretty straightforward, and in a lot of ways it is. Put my camera in here. But what we've got is a lot of people have a hard time lining up your line with the cut. So you've got to get this lined up so that when you cut along there, this should run right past your blade. There's a groove in here that we could use. Like I say, you can do cross cuts and you can put that in the groove, but we don't need that for right now because we're making this cut. But I can use that groove to kind of get an idea of where this should be. So when I make this cut, couple things. Number one, this is the piece of the material that I want to save, and this is my scrap. So I'm going to cut on this side of my line, and I'm going to leave the line, leave the line, leave the line. We can always come back and clean it up, but if you cut too much the first time, that's a bad thing. So let me cut this cut. Notice my hands are way out here on both sides. I never want to get my thumbs right down here. It's just a common mistake that people do, because sometimes you'll be pushing against this and then there may be a weak spot in the wood or whatever. You end up, it is much easier to push. All right, so now let's say we're cutting a curve. So here's a curve that I want to cut. Well, this is too tight for me to come through and cut all at once. I'm going to twist that blade. So what I'm going to do are called relief cuts, and I'm just going to make straight cuts that come in to my curve. And then I can back out. As long as it's a short straight line, backing out isn't bad. So what happens now, once I cut these reliefs, now I can come back and cut this, and I'm going to make a tangent cut. I'm not going to try to do this whole curve. I'm going to start somewhere and I'm going to aim for the top of this circle because I can come back. You see those pieces fall away. You hear that blade starting to scream a little bit? That means it's getting a little twisty. So this way those pieces fall away, just leave them, they're not in your way. So those are relief cuts. We don't want to bend the blade. Let me grab my other piece here. So as I look at this, I'm going to plan my cuts a little bit. This one I'm going to do a tangent cut, and I'm just going to kind of come across, and I'm going to try to catch that curve, but I'm not really trying to make that whole thing. I'm just going to come and hit it as much as I can, and then if my blade does go off, I want it to go off this way. Once it goes off this way, then I've cut into my material, and that may be it for my material. I can do the same thing here. I can make a tangent cut across here. These, for the most part, I'm just going to come straight in, and then that little piece is going to fall out, so I don't have to back out of it. This one takes a little bit of planning. What I'm going to do with this one, I want this line, I want to get all of this out of here, but I can't really get the blade back in here. So a lot of times I'll make a straight cut down, and then I'll cut this line, and then I get rid of that chunk, and then I can do this cut, and I can come in here and do what we call nibble cuts, and it's just taking a little bit of material away at the time. For this one, again, I'm going to cut it straight across, and then I'm going to put a few relief cuts in here. Relief cuts should go right up to your line, but not too far. So let's do a couple of these. First of all, I'm going to cut my piece to length. This is a nice thing because now my hand is off to the right and I got something that I'm holding on to. Whoop. Makes a nice square cut. Alright, so move that out of the way. So my next cut, I'm just going to start with the face here, and I'm going to cut this, again, that tangent cut. I'm not trying to start right on the line. Getting to that line. Boom. Then I can come back, get that last part. If you're cutting something really long, sometimes you can push it through and come around and pull it through the backside. I don't need to do that now. So my cuts here, again, I just want to line up that line straight in, pop. That little piece falls out. Ooh, a little excited there. Boom, there we go. Straight cut. So that was my tangent cut. Now this piece, I'm going to show you my nibble cut. So first one I'm going to do is just straight down here to that corner, and then down to here. If you have to back out, you'd rather back out of the shorter cut than the longer one. So I can't really get my blade all the way down into that corner, but now, because I've gotten that some room in there, I can bring it down to here, and I'm going to this corner. And then I can back that out, and I can follow my line down. Now I got a little more space in here. Now I just need to nibble away at that piece. So I just take a little cut. I'm going to come back and clean this up with a chisel. So it doesn't have to be perfect. But again, a lot of times I can't get, especially with a bigger saw blade, I can't get it into a little corner like this. So I got to work at that a little bit to get there. This one, you've got a curved cut and a straight cut. So I'm going to do the shorter straight cut first. Back out of that one, and then I can do that curved cut up to here. And then finally, I'm putting in some relief cuts here because the radius of this cut on the tail is just too small. Alright, so here we go. Those little pieces fall away and remove that tension. Where the radius gets tighter, I want more relief cuts. So that I don't bend that blade. A couple other things. Don't cut round stock on here. When things twist, when the blade is coming by, they will spin, and when you're hanging on to them, it'll pull your hand with them. Always keep 2-inch margin of safety. Keep your hands 2 inches away from the blade. And then when you're done, be sure you pick up your little chunks and pieces.